All right, Chase Thomas Podcast. We are back where I'm now joined by someone who used to be like what I'm not used to what I'm looking at right now, Jake, because what I used to see you on, how I first discovered you was just like this plethora plethora of helmets, of college football
Yep.
helmets, all scattered behind you. It's discombobulating not seeing you without. You've got the backwards hat, so that is
Oh, yeah.
that's important. We got that, so I know I'm talking to the right JBoy, but not having the helmets behind you, it like I said, it's discombobulating. It's a new era.
Yeah, man. We got a big announcement to make. We were at the College Football Hall of Fame on the volume, excuse me, with Colin Cowherd, and making a move to an even bigger platform that we should announce soon, and getting the live show back. Shout out to the Booster Club, but yeah, just grinding it out and ready to get it going.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I'm excited to hear what that's going to be when that does come out. But Jake, I wanted to hit some SEC stuff with you
Yeah,
this evening because the team that you are quite familiar with, the Auburn Tigers, they decided to go full Tennessee this offseason. And as a Tennessee graduate student, as someone who is in the Knoxville area, and is very familiar with the Tennessee coaching carousel and all that it can entail from a rabid fan base and a rabid booster base. Where are you at right now? Now that it is confirmed that Bryan Harsin will be back roaming the sidelines for at least one more year for Auburn.
really. Things go on behind the scenes. Whether it's inquiries, whether it's investigations, whether it's trying to find stuff out. But it really kind of reminds me of Edward Norton from Fight Club. I mean, Auburn basically just sat there and beat the hell out of themselves in the public eye for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of what side of the fence you're on, if you wanted to keep Bryan Harsin, if you wanted to move on from Bryan Harsin, the optics of this was horrible. The way it played out was horrible. It was embarrassing, and you do all that just to keep him. I mean, now you talk about giving up leverage. Any leverage that you would have had, because it's going to go one or two ways. Either one, he's not going to succeed and they're going to fire him and it's still going to be a mess, or he's going to do really, really well. And now you're at the behest of him. And if I'm Bryan Harsin, what trust do I have left in the people that are the Geppettos of the situation that are pulling the strings? Do I really trust them? Do I really think that they have my best interest? So basically, the money people at Auburn put Auburn in a bad spot. I mean, I'm not a politician, never have been one, but I do understand leverage. Leverage isn't just what you use to lift something stronger than what you can normally lift. But it put Auburn in a bad situation. It put Bryan Harsin in a bad situation, and you did all this for nothing. It's like I said earlier on the show. You ought to change the mascot from the Tigers to the Masochists, because I don't understand why you would do that to yourself.
It's also just that, like, the ESPN report is something that I just keep going back to from a couple days ago. I don't know if you saw it with Rittenberg and everybody.
Yeah.
I think Thamel was on it, where Harsin just did little things where I read it and I was like, oh, this is not a marriage that's going to work. Like him skipping the Bo Jackson charity golf game, him skipping the coaches summit in Macon. So Heupel's there, Beamer's there, Norvell, Kirby. It's like, oh, no. You can maybe do that years down the line. You've won a lot, but to not ingratiate yourself with little things like that were just kind of surprising to me. And also, it's just, I mean, you've talked about this, and everyone who covers the sport, we all know it all comes down to recruiting. Like I see that with Heupel. It's like the offense is great. Like it's fun. We're coming out with number 3 in the early S&P projections for 2022. But like, if this kind of class continues at Auburn, it doesn't matter what all the other stuff is. It doesn't matter anything else, right? Like this is the main thing, is what is he doing to remedy that situation? That's what you want to know if you're an Auburn fan.
Yeah, well, I always say it's the 3 pillars. I mean, I did it for 9 years, 6 at the Division I level. It's about recruiting, development, and culture. And you can't have development if you don't have guys that are good enough to develop, or guys that can come in there and do things early. And then your culture is built with guys that you recruited that are talented, that do it the right way. You can't put those other 2 if you don't have the first one. It's like play calling. I know a lot of average play callers that look like, the Wizard of Oz and Matt Damon from Good Will Hunting. Because they have great players. There's a lot of great play callers that look average because they have average players. Without the players, it doesn't matter. As a coach, you're not throwing a pass, you're not running the ball, you're not making a tackle. And he's got to understand it's the jungle out here. Like this, it's a fist fight. This isn't Boise. You have to do the little things, and it has to be you. The best head coaches are the ones that are that go in there and do the things in recruiting, that understand the importance of not only appearance, but winning the appearance. I mean, Nick Saban's the greatest college football coach of all time. He still does the little things in recruiting that you have to do to be able to stay there. Kirby Smart, how do you think Georgia got where they are? It wasn't, he didn't, meet Morpheus somewhere and take a red pill and then all of a sudden it worked. You have to go do those things. You're not too big for those things. And Bryan Harsin, while he has a lot of good qualities and going through this is increased his popularity, if he doesn't win, all that's out the window. And the way they finished last year, the recruiting class they have, I mean, they haven't met their needs on the offensive line. I don't lend as much credence as everybody else does to the portal of guys leaving, because you do have to trim the fat a little bit, and every circumstance is different. But if you're not down there, if you're not shovel ready, as they say, you're going to find yourself on the way out the door, and not because of cause. The cause is because you lost. So I think he's got to change that. He's got to fix that. And he's got to bring some stability back. Auburn hasn't had stability. These other schools that are having success in what is an unstable college football world, they're the programs that are showing the most stability, and Auburn hasn't had that.
What does your gut tell you? Do you think he ultimately figures it out and that this is a marriage that lasts for several more years, or do you think this is just another 1-year blip?
I always, even with the transfer portal, because you can flip a program, like I say, faster now than they can flip a house on HGTV with those two twin brothers. But, if he doesn't start understanding, and it's not that, I'm big and bad and I'm not afraid of anybody, whatever. If he doesn't start understanding the parts of recruiting that he has to understand, I don't see it lasting. But right now, you can't judge a guy for 1 year on the field. It's not fair in the SEC, especially the SEC West, and at the highest level of college football in general. So, I think it's too early to make a call. I don't think it's fair to judge him on a 2022 class, because recruiting is all about relationships. Now, the transfer portal, with getting offensive linemen in, that's a different thing. And if they don't fix that, none of this is going to matter. So if he doesn't fix the offensive line, he won't be at Auburn for more than 2 years. If he does, then I think he will. I still think it's a little too early to call. I don't want to call the race, before all the votes are counted, per se.
What was your favorite SEC coaching hire this cycle?
Man, I like Billy at Florida. I know
Okay.
a lot of Tennessee fans aren't going to like that. I think Billy is exactly what Florida needs. He's a guy that's going to hold guys accountable. He's a disciplinarian, but he's also cool. In the coaching community, we call him Chill Bill. I mean, he's a guy that can go in there and recruit anybody from any place. He understands, being genuine, not being fake, but it's not soft. It's not, we're going to let them get away with whatever they want to get as long as we're friends. That's not how it operates. That's not how good coaches operate. You can be balanced. I think Billy is really balanced. I think he's going to do it his way, but understand what he has to do in Gainesville, not only with the fan base, but with the players in the locker room. So I thought Billy was a really underrated hire, even though outside of the SEC, I mean, Miami getting Mario Cristobal, the state of Florida is up for grabs right now. And I'm not talking about Bush versus Gore.
Well, it's also just that Clemson's a huge wild card here too, right? With, the season they just had and recruiting slipping a little bit, they've dominated that state, and just seeing if they start to fall off a little bit, that opens up a lot of doors for teams, like you said, in the state of Florida who have just gotten pillaged. And if you do the full biopsy on why Florida State is not what they are anymore, it's just because of who went to their territory and the expansion of their territory. There was just it just changed a lot for them. I don't know. The Florida thing with Tennessee, we would just prefer to play them later in the year. If we played this Florida team in November this past year, I think we drubbed them. We just play them early. And for whatever reason, it's just, I hate playing Florida early. If we could get Florida in November on the calendar every year, I'm fine with it. Let's bring it. But for whatever reason... Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's almost like Georgia and Auburn playing a little bit earlier this year. You'd rather get some guys early than have to go through the gauntlet late. I still think Tennessee is really ahead of Florida, especially from a roster personnel standpoint. And Josh has them believing. Josh had.
Don't say this to me. Don't give me hope until we beat them. Don't do this to me.
I'm not saying they're going to win the East, but I believe Tennessee is going to put themselves in a relevant situation because they have an identity. They're not
Mm-hmm.
scrambling. That it's like that show with Mandy Moore. This is us. Like at least you know
Mm-hmm.
who you are. No, I don't watch that show, but at least you know who you are. I think Tennessee knows who they are, and I'm excited to see how Josh does there because Josh is a really good guy. He's a really good coach, and I like the staff he's put around him.
I just wonder with the East, and I want to get your perspective on this because the East is growing. I mean, the SEC as a whole is obviously extremely competitive, hyper competitive, but there's a lot of talk about the West. But when I look at the East right now, I don't know. It's just funny when teams or fan bases get super excited about like a Spencer Rattler and South Carolina fans. They've won the month of February. They're all excited. And then you see the S&P Plus. They're 49th. And you see what we saw from Spencer Rattler this past year and what we saw of him coming out of high school and that kind of stuff. And like, it's not a slam dunk. You got to move past
Yeah.
the recruiting rankings, and eventually you are what you are. Eventually you might just be a Tate Martell. And that is something that South Carolina fans are not ready to hear because it's like a 5-star. It's a big get. And Shane Beamer is like the most likable coach in the conference, which is super cool. That's all great. But where are the wins coming from? So when I hear that like Barton Simmons is the CEO or whatever at Vanderbilt, and I'm like, cool, Clark Lee is building a 2- and 3-star army. Great. Where are the wins coming? Where are the wins coming? Because Tennessee, like you said, they have an identity. You're going to have to score 40. Like if you're not Georgia to beat Tennessee for the foreseeable future. Georgia's not going anywhere. You like the Napier hire. Kentucky has built this consistent juggernaut. Where is South Carolina moving up? Where are the wins coming? When you look at it, it's like this is a 5-7 team, 6-6 team next year. If you look at the schedule, and I feel like that with Mizzou too. So when people get excited about these lower end schools moving up because their coaches are like, well, and they have an uptick in recruiting, I'm like, that's all great. Where are the wins coming? Show me the wins?
No, look, when I look at South Carolina, sometimes, when you're, and you know how it is with Tennessee, when you want hope and you haven't had hope, sometimes you embrace it and you squeeze it and you love it. It's like Chris Farley on Tommy Boy. It's like I pet it and I love it. I hold it. But hope isn't a plan. But I will say this. I think Shane's going to end up doing a good job in South Carolina, but I don't think people realize the roster rebuild that he had, he inherited. And, getting a guy like Spencer, sometimes a fresh start for a guy, is big. I think Spencer mentally, kind of the way he goes about things has to change. We know he has the talent. But look, this game's won and lost up front. I don't care if it's the NFL. I don't care if it's college football. I don't care if it's Friday Night Tykes. Like, it doesn't matter. The game is won and lost up front. And that's the race because there's a whole hell of a lot more good wide receivers out there than there are offensive tackles that can compete not only at a high level, but early enough to get you there. But I always preach patience. If you're a South Carolina fan, going 6-6 this next year isn't the worst thing in the world. South Carolina's not going to be a team that goes and competes for the East every year. It's just not going to happen. You kind of are who you are. Missouri, I think, would drink. I do think eventually they're going to have a breakthrough season. Can he consistently do it? I don't know. I wasn't a huge fan of Connor Bazelak. I mean, he's a guy that we had on the show a ton. But, really with what he brings, with what Drink wants to do, I think the jury's still out there. But I do think South Carolina fans can expect with Shane Beamer to be able to bring in guys that can compete and put themselves in a position to win not only the one-off or the two-off games, but have a chance as you get into November where the season's not pretty much written on the wall. But again, you can't look. That's the thing about playing in conference. Somebody's got to lose, and you all play each other. So when you look at the schedule, there's never a day off, but it's good for college football. It's good for the SEC when there isn't a weak division. And I think, Georgia being the head of the class, Florida really being the head of the class, since they went Thelma and Louise and flew off a cliff this past year, I do think you're going to see a much more competitive East, which just makes the SEC that much harder.
The team that's most likely to win the East that's not named Georgia, and the team most likely to win the West that's not named Alabama next year are who?
I'll go West first. I'll say A&M. I think going to win that job. As crazy as that sounds, I think Haynes Kings does some things. I didn't mean for that to rhyme like Dr. Seuss over here. I don't know if he throws the ball well enough, and I think Max has enough dog in him with the personnel they have around him. And I like what A&M brings back defensively, even though they lost Leal, a couple other guys they've obviously recruited at a very high clip. Not only this past year, but they've stacked good class on good class with offensive line and defensive line, and that's how you bridge the gap with Alabama there in the West. But looking at the East, I mean, I don't know how you wouldn't say Tennessee if it's not Georgia. I mean, Florida, again, you're still going to be in transition regardless of how good Billy is. Vanderbilt, doesn't matter. This isn't baseball or Quidditch. South Carolina, don't think they're there yet. Missouri, don't think they're there yet. Kentucky would be Another one with Levis coming back. I mean, I think it's a fight between Tennessee and Kentucky, but I think with Hendon coming back, with what they do on offense, I still think Kentucky's going to have to find a way. I love Wandell and what they have to get some more weapons around him to be able to do what they want to do more consistently. So I'll go Tennessee.
Okay. I mean, you've got a lifelong spot on this podcast. This has just been glowing reviews from you on Tennessee.
Well, I
wasn't
promise
expecting
you,
that.
Look, I was the first one, and I still think, look, the offensive stuff's great, but you have to be able. I wonder once Heupel gets that defense where he wants it from a personnel standpoint, if he may take his foot off the gas every now and then to give those guys a breather in the games against Georgia and against these teams with elite front sevens and because look, going fast is great, but you go out there and get 4 3 and outs in a row, and that defense is out in the field for 45, 50 snaps in the first half, you're in trouble. It's just the nature of the beast. It's gravity, like John Mayer said.
Well, it's also that we do that on offense. So the offensive line coach talks to Heupel about it, where he's like, "Hey, we need to slow." Like at this point, like he's reading the offensive lineman, and he's like, "No, stop!" Like he's in Heupel's ear, like we have to stop because he knows his offensive lineman. And I think we'll have different offensive linemen. Like it's not the same bodies. He doesn't want the same guys as what Tim Chaney wanted.
Fast, especially with offensive linemen, because it totally negates what you're trying to do. Because they're not exactly in the 100-meter getting off the field, especially when they're tired.
No, but I'm excited. At the very least, it's fun. Every Tennessee game is a blast under Heupel thus far, so I'm here for it. Yeah. I'll end on this front. You've talked to so many different college football coaches in your career thus far. Who have you enjoyed talking with the most? Who's the most fun to have a conversation with?
Mike Leach. It's not even close. Because really, we talk about football for about 2 minutes, and then it's something about Pirates or the time that the dog ran on the field. He's just a hilarious person in general. So I would have to say Mike Leach. I'll tell you another. Hugh Freeze is fun. Hugh's a fun interview. Very honest, very transparent. But I got to give it to my guy, Mike Leach. We love Mike Leach.
So the state of Mississippi, they're doing something right over there with these coaches. I like it. Kiffin's probably up there too.
Kiffin was good. I've had him on once. I need to get him on again. I think he was kind of a little gassed when we had him on the first time. But I'll get him on again.
There you go. What can we look out for you? You got that announcement coming up, but JBoy, how do they keep up with your work, your show, everything going forward?
Yeah, to quote Cam Murphy, we're breaking it down from a fundamental standpoint, not only college football, but basketball, as well as we get toward March Madness. Tennessee, obviously doing well there, to keep plugging Tennessee in the SEC.
I appreciate that.
A half ago would eventually be the best conference in college basketball, and it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when they decide they want to do that. But you can find us at our the JBoy Show YouTube channel. It's really easy to find. You'll see the Win the Water Cooler mark as we transition to this new announcement. Also on Twitter at the JBoy Show. I appreciate you having me on, Chase. You did a really good job, buddy.
Thanks, man. I greatly appreciate it, and we'll have to check back in again soon.
Dude, you let me know. I'm always down.